I still remember the feeling in the earth that summer. It wasn't just the dryness or the heat baking the clay soil into brick. It was a brittleness, the kind of deep, structural tension that settles into the ground right before it decides to snap. After 25 years as a certified arborist, most of my life spent diagnosing high-risk timber, from hurricane-prone zones in Florida to the fire ladders in California. I'd learned to read a tree's body language the way some men read the sky. Something was waiting to give. The official forecast said, clear and calm for the foreseeable future. But this is California. The ground here doesn't do calm. It just sits. And the giant, 150-year-old oak tree standing like a monument in front of our HOA president's house, it was a ticking time bomb. Willow Creek was famous for that tree. Karen Risson, the president, calls it the crown jewel of the neighborhood, a symbol of our community's deep roots. But when I looked at it, I didn't see beauty. I saw physics. I saw load distribution, stress fractures, and a split codominant stem fighting a battle it was about to lose. I saw the canker rot eating it alive from the inside out. That tree wasn't historic. It was hollow. I'd mentioned the rot casually at a community meeting once. I was immediately shut down. "We have a strict tree preservation by law, Mark," Karen had said, her voice like polished ice. "We don't harm our community assets." Harming it? I was trying to stop it from harming her. This time, I didn't just mention it. I did a full, non-invasive assessment from the sidewalk. I took high-resolution photos of the fungal conchs at the base, the fruiting bodies of the rot inside. I used a rubber mallet to sound the trunk. The thud was deep and dead, not the sharp talk of healthy wood. I drafted a 5-page report. Not a panicked letter, but a professional analysis with diagrams, photos, and my arborist certification number on the letterhead. I detail the structural failure points and the inevitable collapse path, right onto her second-story master bedroom. I walked it to the HOA office during their open hours. Karen was at her desk, which was, fittingly, made of polished oak. She was approving new, harmonious paint colors for mailboxes. She looked up, she smiled tight and practiced. "What is it now? More worries about our poor, defenseless trees?" "Karen, this is serious," I said, placing the binder on her desk. "Your tree, the one over your house. It's not stable. The rot is advanced, and that split stem is a critical failure point. It needs to come down. Immediately." She didn't even open the binder. She just pushed it back toward me with one perfectly manicured finger. Then she laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was a sharp, condescending bark that bounced off the laminate flooring. "Mark, really?" she said, her voice dripping with fake pity. "Are things slow at the old company? Are you trying to drum up some business by scaring me into cutting down the most beautiful tree in Willow Creek?" I felt my jaw tightened. This isn't a sales pitch. I'm your neighbor. That tree is hollow. A strong wind, even a minor tremor, and it's going to fail. Her smile disappears at the word tremor. "Oh, for heaven's sake, now you're a geologist? We are not cutting down that tree. It's a historic landmark. You're just a tree butcher looking for a victim." She stood up, a clear dismissal. "I have real work to do, Mark. If you'll excuse me." She turned her back to me, picking up a paint swatch as if I'd already evaporated. I left the report on her desk. I knew she'd throw it in the trash the second I walked out the door. By the time I got home, I already had an email. Not a reply, but a violation notice from the HOA board. "Dear Mr. Jensen," it read, "Your unsolicited report regarding community-protected assets has been received. Please be advised that soliciting unauthorized arborist work, Bylaw 7.4, and harassing a board member, Bylaw 2.1, are serious violations. A fine of $500 has been added to your account. Please refrain from distributing alarmist materials or you will face further censure." $500. Not for being wrong, but for daring to submit a professional warning. I wasn't just a tree butcher anymore. I was a convicted criminal. I was boiling. But the worst part wasn't the fine. It was the way Karen turned it into theater. The next Saturday was the Willow Creek Summer Social, a community potluck held on the main green. Karen, of course, was the host, walking around with a glass of white wine, laughing, her voice carrying across the lawn. I was just there to grab a cookie and leave, but she saw me. She raised her glass, a signal for everyone to quiet down. Everyone, I just want to thank you all for coming. It's so wonderful to see our community together, she said, her eyes finding mine. And a special thank you to our neighborhood's very own tree butcher. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Mark, over there, she said, pointing right at me, wanted to celebrate summer by demolishing our beautiful, historic oak. Can you imagine? People turned to look. Some looked embarrassed, but most just smiled politely, following their queen's lead. My neighbor, Greg, who I'd helped with his Japanese maple just last month, suddenly found his shoes very interesting. Don't worry, she continued. I told him we like our history. We like our beauty. We're not going to let one man's paranoia ruin our neighborhood. The laughter was louder this time. I was the butt of the joke. The crank neighborhood. I just turned and walked home, their laughter feeling like needles in my back. If they wanted to ignore the warning, they could. But I wasn't going to be silent. I went back to my office. I opened my laptop and emailed my full, unredacted report, photos, diagrams, credentials, and all, to the County Planning Commission and the City Department of Building and Safety. I flagged it as an imminent public hazard, noting that the tree's collapse zone included the public sidewalk and street. I doubted they'd act fast, but at least now it was logged with a higher authority. Then I started a new file. I dug out my old DSLR camera and my best borescope, a small, flexible camera. I went out at dawn when no one was watching. I didn't just take pictures of the tree. I took time-stamped photos inside the crack. I fed the borescope into the hollow, documenting the vast, rotting void inside the trunk. I used a digital caliper to measure the width of the split stem. I will measure it again every single week. I backed everything up to 3 separate hard drives and locked one in my fireproof safe. If Karen wanted to rule by ridicule and fines, fine. I will respond with data. I would build a record so complete, so undeniable, that when that tree finally came down, they wouldn't be able to hide behind a single unforeseeable or act of God. They would have to drown in the truth. You don't realize how much power reputation has in a small community until it's turned against you. I was now the resident crank. People who used to ask me for advice on their hydrangeas now just gave a tight-lipped nod and crossed the street when they saw me coming. Karen's tree butcher narrative had stuck. But Karen wasn't content with just smearing me. She had to celebrate her victory. The next HOA newsletter arrived by email. The cover photo was a big, glossy, professional shot of the rotten oak itself, framed against her house. The headline reads, "Our majestic oak standing strong." The article, which Karen had clearly written herself, was about how certain new voices were questioning the historic integrity of the community, but that the board would not bend to negativity and fear-mongering. It was a direct attack. She used the rotting tree as a symbol of her own power. I was still waiting for a response from the county, but I knew capitalism was slow. I decided to try one last tactic. I put together a new, one-page report. This one had only 3 things on it. The borescope image from my camera showing the vast, hollow void inside the trunk. A close-up of the deepening split stem. A simple diagram shows a red arrow for the collapse path, right onto Karen's master bedroom. At the bottom, I wrote one line. This is not politics. It's physics. This tree will fall. I printed 4 copies and late at night, slid them into the mailboxes of the other 4 board members, bypassing Karen completely. For 2 days, silence. Then, while I was on an evening walk, David, the board's treasurer, caught up to me, looking nervous. He kept glancing over his shoulder, as if he was afraid of being seen with me. Hey, Mark, he stammered. I got your flyer. I waited. Those pictures, he said, softening his voice, are they really from the inside of Karen's tree? Is it that hollow? It's worse, I said. It's a 4-inch shell holding up 60 tons of dead wood. It's not a matter of, David. It's twin. All it needs is one good shake. His face went pale. One good shake. Good. Our next meeting is Monday. I'll try to talk to her about it. Don't try, David, I said. You tell her. It's community assets on the line, or worse. He just nodded nervously and hurried away. I thought for a moment that I'd finally broken through. But Karen's hubris was stronger than David's fear. 3 days later, a beautiful cardstock invitation was delivered to every home in Willow Creek. The Willow Creek Annual Garden Party. It announced that this year's party will be hosted at the historic home of our president, Karen Risson. And at the very top of the card, right under a new picture of the tree, were the words, "Come celebrate with us in the shade of our majestic Willow Creek oak." She wasn't just ignoring the warning. She was inviting the entire neighborhood to a party under the murder weapon. It was her final, arrogant middle finger. Long before Karen Risson ever hosted a garden party, long before these streets had names like Willow Creek Way or Serenity Lane, that oak tree stood there. It had survived droughts, ice storms, and decades of suburban development. Karen calls it a symbol of strength. She was wrong. She saw historic. I saw heartwood rot. I'd spent my career studying it. It's a cancer of trees. It starts with a fungus, armillaria or ganoderma, entering through a wound, a snapped limb, a lawnmower gash. The fungus doesn't attack the living part of the tree, the outer rings. It goes for the core, the dense, dead heartwood that holds the tree up. It silently eats the tree from the inside out, hollowing it until the trunk is nothing but a fragile shell of living bark over a void of punkwood and decay. The tree looked alive. It still grew leaves. That's the part that fools everyone. I'd first noticed the fungal conchs, pale, shelf-like mushrooms, at its base 3 years ago. I'd sent a polite email to the HOA suggesting they cable the heaviest limbs to reduce stress. Karen had responded with a scan of a 10-year-old arborist report from some golf buddy of her husband's, declaring the tree healthy and significant. Case closed. But it wasn't just the rot. The last few years of mild droughts had made the ground brittle. I had photos showing how the sidewalk near her house had buckled, how the roots had begun to lift the brick landscaping in slow, uneven waves. Every warning sign was there. So they planted petunias around the base. A ring of soft pink flowers to hide the decay. I keep records. Not because I thought I could change her mind, but because I needed to know I wasn't crazy. I had a file folder, printed and marked, Karen Risson Oak Risk. Inside were the photos from every season, copies of the emails, the outdated arborist report, and my own log of every time I tried to warn them. A quiet, documented history of an ignored disaster. That Saturday, the day of the garden party, the air was perfectly still. It was 3 p.m., bright, sunny, and 75 degrees. Not a cloud in the sky. It was the kind of day that made me look like a fool and Karen look like a queen. I walked the perimeter of my yard, my stomach in a knot. I could hear the party starting. The sound of a string quartet tuning. The high-pitched, polite laughter. I looked down the street. It was worse than I imagined. They had set it all up directly underneath the rotten canopy. White linen tablecloths, silver champagne buckets, a full catering station, and at least 40 guests in pastel shorts and sun hats. All mingling, sipping wine, and standing on the compromised root system of a 60-ton hollowed-out tree. And in the center of it all was Karen, holding a microphone. She was giving a speech. I just want to thank you all for coming, her voice echoed from a small amplifier. It's so wonderful to celebrate the strength and resilience of our beautiful community, right here under our magnificent, historic oak. She was met with polite applause. She smiled, then leaned into the mic, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. I know some of you heard rumors from our neighborhood's very own tree butcher. A few people laughed nervously. David, the treasurer, was standing near the back, looking like he wanted to be sick. He told me this tree was going to fall down. Karen continued, laughing. He told me a mild tremor was going to knock it over. Can you believe the paranoia? The crowd laughed with her. She raised her glass. Well, here we are. The sun is shining, the ground is still, and our tree is... She never finished the sentence. It started as a low rumble from deep in the earth, a sound you feel more than you hear. The champagne glasses on the tables began to rattle. The music stopped. A woman gasped, "What was that?" Then the shake hit. It wasn't a big one. It was a moderate, rolling 4.5. A typical California tremor. But it was violent. The ground lurched sideways. I grabbed my doorframe, watching as the world snapped into sharp, terrifying focus. Down the street, the party guests screamed, stumbling and falling as the ground wave rolled through. I watched the other trees, the healthy ones. They swayed. They whipped back and forth, flexible, absorbing the shock. But Karen's tree, it didn't sway. The vibration was too much for the hollow, brittle wood. I heard it before I saw it. A sound like a cannon shot, a crack that was louder than the earthquake itself. The tree groaned. A deep, agonizing, structural groan as the split stem tore apart. Karen, who had fallen to her knees, looked up just in time to see it. The entire tree, 60 tons of it, didn't just fall. It topped. It tipped over in one single, horrifying, inevitable motion. Gravity had finally won. I watched it fall, not in slow motion, but with the sickening speed of physics. It came down diagonally, its thickest limbs leading, smashing through the air with a force that seemed to suck the wind around it. Then the sound wasn't just a crash. It was a roar, a rupture, a monstrous, thunderous, bone-shaking slam that echoed across the neighborhood like a bomb had gone off. Karen's house, once pristine, proud, and the symbol of her authority, simply disappeared. The entire front half disappeared in an explosion of splintering wood, shattered glass, and pulverized brick. The lights, the music, the laughter, all gone. Screams pierced the air. And somewhere in all of it, under the swirling dust and debris, I heard Karen's voice. It wasn't laughing anymore. The earthquake hadn't just been a tremor. It had been a detonation. A gut punch of physics so visceral, so immediate, that it seemed to silence the entire neighborhood for a full 10 seconds. No birds, no cars, just the ringing in my ears and the thick, choking cloud of plaster, dust, and sawdust where Karen's house used to be. And then the screaming started again. Not just Karen's. Everyone's. My training kicked in. I grabbed my work boots and a first aid kit from my truck and ran down the street. It was chaos. The majestic oak lay like a corpse, its rotting, hollow interior finally exposed for the whole world to see. It had punched through the roof, collapsing the entire second floor and obliterating the front of the house. The party guests were scattered across the lawn, covered in dust and champagne. A woman was holding her arm, the bone clearly broken. A man was trying to pull his wife out from under a heavy branch that had missed her by inches. The string quartet's cellist was just sitting on the curb, staring blankly, his expensive instrument smashed to pieces beside him. And then I saw her. Karen was being helped out of what used to be her front doorway by David, the treasurer. Her perfect designer dress was torn and filthy. A gash was bleeding on her forehead, matting her blonde hair with dust and blood. She stood on the lawn, looking at the ruin of her home. She looked at the disenchanted, injured guests. And then she saw me. Her eyes narrowed. The shock on her face curdled, instantly, into pure, undiluted rage. "You!" she shrieked, shoving David away and stumbling toward me. I stopped, standing my ground on the cracked sidewalk. "You did this," she screamed, pointing a trembling, dusty finger. Heads turned. The crying guests, the dazed neighbors who were now running out of their homes. Everyone stopped and stared. "You sabotaged it," she yelled, her voice cracked with hysteria. "You've been obsessed with this tree since you moved in. You weakened it. You did something to it. This is your fault." I didn't yell back. I just looked at her, then pointed to the massive, exposed trunk. The place where it had split was a cavern of black, powdery rot. "You call that sabotage, Karen?" I said, my voice quiet but hard enough to cut through her screaming. "I call it Ganoderma. I call it heartwood rot. It's the same rot I showed you in the report, the one you refused to read." "Liar," she screamed, lunging at me, but David grabbed her arm. "You caused this. You'll pay for this." "Karen, stop." It was David. His face was pale white and he was shaking. "Just stop. He's right." Karen froze. She turned to David, her eyes wide with betrayal. "What did you say?" "He's right," David repeated, his voice barely a whisper but loud in the sudden silence. "He warned us. He showed us the pictures. He told me it just needed one good shake." Karen's mouth opened and closed. She had no words. Her entire narrative, her entire kingdom, had just collapsed along with her house. The sirens began their long, slow wail in the distance, closer growing. I saw the first flashing red and blue lights approaching. I just turned and walked back toward my house. I needed my file. The one marked Karen Risson Oak Risk. I had a feeling the police and the insurance investigators were going to want to see it. The arrival of the fire trucks and sheriff's cruisers sliced through the dust and confusion, turning the chaotic scene into an official investigation. The air, thick with the smell of pulverized wood and ruptured gas lines, was now flashing an agonizing strobe of red and blue. A fire captain, his face grim, was already shouting orders. "Get a triage perimeter set up on that grass. I want all non-responders back. Check the foundation, make sure the gas is off. Where is the homeowners?" Karen, seeing the badges, seemed to find a new surge of energy. Her shock and grief focused, like a lens, into a sharp, accusatory weapon. She stumbled past David and ran toward a sheriff's deputy. "Officer, arrest that man," she shrieked, pointing directly at me. The deputy, a tall man with a tired face, looked at me, then back at Karen, who was covered in blood and dust. "Ma'am, what are you talking about? We need to get you to triage." "No, him. Mark Jensen," she yelled, and the entire crowd of survivors and neighbors went silent. "He did this. He's been obsessed with this tree. He threatened me. He's been trespassing, doing things to it. He must have poisoned it, sabotaged it. He wanted this to happen. He's a tree butcher." The deputy's hand instinctively rested on his belt. He had the weary look of a man who'd dealt with 1,000 neighborhood disputes, but this one had a body count of property. He looked at me. "Sir, is that true? Did you threaten this woman or her property?" I hadn't moved. I just took one calm step forward, past the edge of my own lawn, and held up the thick file folder I'd gone back to get. It was the one marked Karen Risson Oak Risk. "Officer, my name is Mark Jensen. I'm a certified arborist, and I'm the one who's been trying to prevent this for 6 months." My voice was clear and calm, cutting through the chaos. "It's true I've been warned her. It's true I told her this tree was hollow, diseased, and was going to collapse. It's true I sent her and the entire board photos from inside the trunk. I have the emails. I have the certified letters. I have the $500 fine she gave me for harassment and soliciting unauthorized work. It's all in here." I tapped the folder. "This isn't a threat, officer. It's a timeline of professional negligence." Karen's face went white. "He's lying. Those pictures are fake. It's all fake science. He's not a doctor." He's just a crank. The deputy looked exhausted, caught between a hysterical victim and a man holding a stack of evidence. He turned to the crowd of neighbors. "I'll ask again," he said, his voice rising. "Does anyone else know about this? Does anyone know what she's talking about?" There was a terrible, agonizing silence. This was the moment. The entire neighborhood held its breath, suspended between Karen's authority and my truth. "It's true." The voice was shaky, but it was David's. The treasurer stepped forward, his expensive suit covered in dust and plaster. He looked like he was going to be sick, but he kept talking. "It's true, officer. He sent us the reports. All of us on the board. The pictures, they were just like he said." He swallowed hard, looking at me with a mix of terror and shame. I spoke to him. He warned me just last week that all it needed was one good shake. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Karen looked at David as if he had just plunged a knife in her back. "Who? You trainer." "He is right," another voice shouted from the crowd. It was Greg, my neighbor, the one who'd looked away at the potluck. His face was red with anger. "We all heard you, Karen. At the summer social. You called him the tree butcher. You made fun of him for it. In front of everyone." Suddenly, the dam of polite neighborhood silence didn't just break, it evaporated. My God, he was right. I saw a copy of that flyer. I thought it was a joke. We all heard her. She told us not to worry. She invited us to a party under it. My kids were here. My kids. A woman in the crowd collapsed into sobs, her husband holding her. All eyes, the deputies, the neighbors, the firefighters, turned from Karen to the wreckage. The physical proof was denied. The massive trunk, split open like a rotten log, was spilling its dark, powdery, decayed insides all over Karen's crushed Mercedes and grand piano. "That's not fake science, Karen," Greg shouted, pointing at the rot. That's sawdust. It's empty." The earthquake hadn't destroyed a healthy tree. It had just exposed a dead one. Karen's fury dissolved. Her shoulders slumped. The power, the authority, the untouchable arrogance. It all evaporated into the dusty air. She wasn't an HOA president anymore. She was just a woman in a torn dress, standing in the ruins of a house she had destroyed with her own pride. Just then, a white news van from Channel 9 Investigates pulled up, rolling past the fire trucks. A reporter, a sharp-looking woman named Sarah, got out, holding a microphone and a printout. She didn't run to Karen. She didn't run to the fire chief. She walked straight to me. "Mr. Jensen?" she asked, her cameraman already rolling. "I'm Sarah Chin. I'm the reporter you copied on that imminent public hazard email to the County Planning Commission last month." She held up the printout. It was my one-page report, the one with the picture of the hollow trunk. "I tried to get a comment from the county," she said, her voice sharp and professional. "They said this was HOA jurisdiction. I also called the HOA office for a comment this morning before the quake. A woman who identified herself as the president told me, and I quoted, 'That tree is a historic landmark and Mr. Jensen is a disgruntled resident.'" "Was that you, ma'am?" Sarah turned her microphone suddenly toward a shell-shocked Karen, who just recovered, speechless. Sarah turned back to me. "Mr. Jensen, the HOA claims you're a crank. The evidence suggests you're the only one who saw this coming. Can you go on record and walk me through exactly what you warned them about?" I looked past her at the crushed house. I saw Karen being led to an ambulance, not in handcuffs, but in a thermal blanket, her face a mask of numbness, vacant shock. I looked at the neighbors who were all watching me, their faces a mix of shame, guilt, and a strange, new respect. This wasn't about revenge. It was about the record. It was about the truth that had been buried even deeper than the rot in that tree. I turned back to the camera, its red recording light blinking like a steady eye. "Yes," I said. "I think it's time everyone knew the truth." The official statement from the HOA arrived in our inboxes 48 hours later. It was a masterpiece of corporate denial. The Willow Creek HOA is devastated by the unforeseeable tragedy that occurred during the recent seismic event, it reads. Our hearts go out to all residents affected, especially our president, Karen Risson, who lost her home in this terrible act of God. We are committed to rebuilding, stronger than ever. Not a single word about the tree. Not a mention of the warnings. Not a whisper of the rot. But they were too late. That night, Sarah Chen's report aired on Channel 9. It was brutal. She starts with a shot of the HOA's email, then cuts to a close-up of my $500 fine for harassment. She showed the hollowed-out tree trunk being hauled away in pieces. Then she showed my photos from inside that trunk, taken a month prior. She played an audio clip of David, the treasurer, admitted off the record that the board was pressured to ignore the report. The backlash was immediate. The community Facebook group, once a quiet feed of lost pets and potluck photos, exploded. Unforeseeable? Are you kidding me? He showed them proof and they fined him? I was at that party. My kids were there. She invited us to sit under it. I want her gone. I want them all gone. Now. By the next morning, the board had collapsed just as hard as the tree. David, along with the other 2 board members, resigned via a group email, effective immediately. David showed up at my door an hour later. He looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. He was holding a manila folder. I'm done, Mark, he said, his voice hoarse. She's trying to blame the insurance company now. Says they should have flagged the tree. She's threatening to sue me for causing panic by talking to you. He shook his head. I should have spoken up at the meeting. I was afraid of her. He handed me the folder. These are the official minutes from the last meeting. The one after I got your flyer. I opened it. I found the line item. Agenda Point 7. Arborist Report M. Jensen. The notes next to it, in Karen's handwriting, were chilling. Motion. Table indefinitely to prevent community panic and unnecessary legal/financial exposure. Vote passed. There was not just negligence. It was a conscious decision to hide the truth to protect her own image. I appreciate this, David, I said. He just nodded and walked away. I didn't have to leak the document. David sent it to Sarah Chen himself. I didn't see Karen for a week. The site of her home was now a condemned lot, surrounded by yellow caution tape and a chain-link fence. The bank had already put a lien on the property. She was there one afternoon, standing by the fence, just staring at the wreckage. A moving van was at her neighbor's house. She was quietly moving her surviving treasures out. Her arm was in a sling, her face was pale, and for the first time, she just looked small. She saw me walking by. Her eyes were dull, the fire completely gone. You ruined me, she whispered, not with anger, but with a flat, empty sadness. I stopped, keeping the fence between us. I didn't, Karen. You had the truth in your hands. You had the photos. You chose to host a party instead. She looked down at the pulverized foundation. It was historic. It was hollow, I said, and you knew it. You just didn't want anyone else to be right. She didn't answer. She just turned and walked to a waiting car, got in, and drove away. I never saw her again. The old HOA was legally dissolved a month later. The lawsuits from the injured partygoers, combined with the proof of willful negligence from the meeting minutes, bankrupted it. We had to start over. We held a community-wide meeting on the same green where Karen had mocked me. This time, I was the one they asked to speak. I didn't talk about Karen. I talked about physics. I talked about soil, about root structures, about transparency. We voted to form a new, smaller, fully transparent community board. They elected me, unanimously, to head the new Safety and Architectural Review Committee. My first act was to commission a full, independent audit of every large, old tree in Willow Creek. We found 3 more that were high risk. This time, when the reports went out, the trees came down the next day. The lot where Karen's house stood was bought by the community from the bank. We held a vote. We decided not to rebuild. Instead, we cleared the rubble. We tore out the foundation. We brought in new soil. And we built a small, simple Unity Park. We planted new, native, healthy trees, maples and sycamores. And in the center, right where the rotten oak used to stand, we placed a simple granite bench. I sit there sometimes. I watch the new trees grow. The kids play on the grass where Karen's living room used to be. The ground here is still. But we're not the same. We learned that the ground doesn't just shake. Sometimes, it reveals the truth. We're a stronger community now, not because we have a majestic tree, but because we finally learned to look inside it. We learned to listen,